Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. We have a new guest in our session today, and his name is Peter. And Peter, I'm going to pronounce your last name wrong, but I'm going to try it first. I've been known to never get names correctly, but I want to try it first and see how it goes. Seraphine.
Seraphine, that's right.
Wow. Okay, I got a record. If I had a clapping machine, I'd probably clap for myself. Peter, Seraphine, thank you so much for joining us today on Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. How has your week or your February been going so far?
Been great. Busy. Other than knocking everything off of my desk as we're talking.
There's always a calamity of chaos sometimes, right? We have
That's
that
great.
happen in life.
That's great for an audio recording, isn't it?
Right. What was that crashing? Well, yeah, so today we're going to talk about a few topics, and I want to pick your brain. One of the main things we're going to talk about is 15 things you can't believe are true in American politics, which I found very interesting and funny to read about. Is it really possible to remain independent political member in a U.S. political party system today? And are we forced to really choose? We'll even do a deep dive into I believe your company or Liberty Lighthouse, and who may need to learn about it or actually let us all know about it. And then, of course, you have your new upcoming book, which I'm really looking forward to, is Trust Shattered, Cases of Government Betrayal, which is pretty much probably on point to these days. And you'll give us a quick sneak peek into book 3 to kind of get us enticed. So that'd be really great as well, and I look forward to that. So ideally, I had found this article, which I thought was very entertaining, that there are 15 things that you can't believe are true about American politics. Now, Peter, have you come across something as crazy or maybe outwritten or outspoken in what we're about to talk about?
I was surprised in reading the 15 things that there's a couple of things that we're missing that I couldn't believe were on there. You know, we constantly talk about how divided we are as a nation,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that the member of the I always get them backwards. I can't remember if it was a member of the House that walked over to the Senate chamber or a member of the Senate that walked over to the House chamber, but beat a man almost to death with his cane.
Jesus,
These are
a
two
cane.
elected. Yeah, it was just before the Civil War, and they were, beat him in the Capitol building.
And we talk about January 6th, if that's the first time that's happened. But
Right.
That's a different topic. That's to get off on too. All right, but let's do a deep dive into these real quick. This is kind of interesting. Number one, now granted, I will preface that this article is about 10 years old, but here's the thing. History is history. And 9 out of 10 times, sometimes things repeat themselves and it's still factually correct. So you may be intrigued about some of these things. So number one on the list is, I find hilarious. In 1928, the Senate appropriated funds to knock out walls in the chamber because they thought bad air quality was killing senators. Now, Peter, you are, I'm going to assume, a great historian in politics or have a great knowledge. What do you think of this one?
I thought it was ridiculous. I mean, the first thing anybody would think of is if air quality is a problem, open a window and get a fan. I mean, there's some ventilation.
Common sense, right?
Yeah.
Common sense. Like, I would think more about what's happening inside the actual building would be the one. I'll just go into a little bit into it. It says it was predictable. Elect a former public health commissioner to the United States Senate and wait for the recommendations about an unhealthy working environment. Now, this guy was just being an ass, but we'll see. Royal Copeland entered the Senate in 1923 after a 5-year term as commissioner of New York City Board of Health. A practicing physician and a medical educator, the New York Senator wasted little time in reaching a conclusion about the quality of air in the Senate chamber. I'm trying not to laugh. This is very hilarious. He cited the deaths of 34 I can't talk today. Incumbent, thank you, senators over the past 12 years and suggested that their lives had probably been shortened by the by the poor quality of air in the chamber. Uh, Nothing else in the world, but just
Yeah.
poor air quality.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There was nothing else going on in 1928.
Oh, nothing else, right? No. In the winter, the dry, heated air was blamed from the spread of influenza, bronchitis, and common cold. In the summer, excessive heat and humidity snapped members' energy and tested their tempers. You know, I can understand a hostile work environment, but for me, a hostile work environment is a boss that's either micromanaging or is a huge dick. But to go ahead and try to pass a law to, yeah, that was very interesting to me. And this also just shows me, or at least tells me, how we are very wasteful when it comes to certain things we do.
Yeah.
Compared to things that are probably going on at that time, at a time in the world, this is one of the things you were worried about the most.
Yeah, it also just goes to show the line of thinking of most government officials. They immediately jump to the most expensive and outrageous solution to whatever the problem is, ignoring the less expensive common sense solutions.
Boggling. Okay, number 2. New Jersey Rep. Rush Holt is a rocket scientist. He also beat supercomputer Watson at Jeopardy! Now it says he won Jeopardy! 5 other times too. He is also willing to take part in Arrested Development reenactments while answering questions on Reddit. The Atlantic said he might be the most interested man in Washington. Well, that kind of seems kind of cool in a way, I guess, but you beat a supercomputer?
Yeah, yeah. Watson, the first real supercomputer.
Wow.
I remember that.
I mean, what does a supercomputer technically do? I mean, it's what, complex transactions or calculations, but
Yeah, but
I
in
mean, does it?
reality, Watson from back then isn't much bigger than what your laptop can do today. Computer
Wow,
computers become faster and more intelligent. Twice as fast and more intelligent every couple of months or a couple of years at the most.
it's very interesting to me. I mean, I used to think supercomputers just are ready to nuke people and do other things, but once again, if you don't know, you don't know. So it's good to get that information. All right, I'm gonna skip around a little bit. California Senator David Broderick is the only sitting senator to have been killed in a duel. Now, I remember the duel of our famous musical, Alexander Hamilton. That's probably the only duel I can really think about, but this was actually another duel that happened. Okay, I'll go into this real quick. Elected to California State Senate, Broderick rapidly became a power broker within the Democratic Party's anti-slavery wing and set his eyes on his seat in the U.S. Senate. He used his power in the legislature to stall for nearly 2 years. A vote on the re-election of Senator William, I'm going to say Gwen, maybe Jen, Gwen, a member of his party's pro-slavery faction. Finally, in 1857, California's other Senate seat opened, and Broderick negotiated a deal with Gwynn under which Broderick would take that seat's full 6-year term, leaving Gwynn the 4-year balance of the blocked seat. Broderick's price for supporting Gwynn was full control of California's federal patronage appointments. I mean, at what point are you going to just start dueling over? I mean, was this over a Senate seat? Oh, okay. This week is good. The men met early in the morning of September 13th at Lake Merced. I actually been there, so that's cool. South of San Francisco. After Broderick's pistol discharged prematurely, got a misfire. Terry coolly aimed and fired into Broderick's chest. The senator's death endowed a rough and tumble political operator with a Maycard's crowd and accelerated the downward spiral to civil war.
Yeah.
Terry was acquitted of the crime and went on to serve the Confederacy. Years later, in 1889, he too was gunned down after threatening the life of Supreme Court Justice Stephen Field. What the?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Again, this goes right back to the fighting in the house with beating people with canes. It was all right before the Civil War. So when you look around at how divided we are today, it can still get a lot worse. What I found really interesting about that story is if you think about it, if you think about the dual situation, you're
Yeah.
sitting there with a single shot, flintlock or single shot black powder pistol,
Hmm.
and the guy across from you pulls his and hits the trigger on the way up and shoots the ground, and now
Wow.
he's just standing there, and you've got all the time in the world now to take aim. You don't have to worry about doing it before he does.
That's just crazy. That's just crazy to be honest with you. Like, you know, I guess that's how things were done back in the day, but technically not too far from what probably happens today. But I guess we use different means of violence towards one another. Oh, this one was crazy to me. Minnesota Senator, not crazy, but actually sounds pretty plausible. Amy Klobuchar raised $17,000 for her Senate campaign from ex-boyfriends. A fact, a fact she announced at the 2009 Washington Press Club Foundation dinner. True story, she said. I know that is the record in the Senate, but in the House, it's held by Barney Frank. Uh, all right. Well, I
I
guess.
want to know if Amy Klobuchar has that many ex-boyfriends, or does she have very wealthy ex-boyfriends?
The rise of political fame could be a road paved with, I guess, in this case, dollar signs. So maybe she had an agenda the whole entire time. Wow. Oh, this is interesting. Michigan Rep. John Dingles has served in Congress for more than 24% of the time since the American Revolution. He is the longest serving member of Congress in history. Dingell took office in 1955 and retired this year after 59 years. So technically, this is still 10 years old, but still at the time, that was a long time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this goes back to another question I have. Like, do you think there should really be term limits on some of these seats that we have in our houses and our Senate? Or technically, probably
Um,
the House mostly.
I'm a little torn on the idea. I've gone back and forth about term limits many times. The idea is that we're supposed to just vote them out when they stop doing their job or they become ineffective or whatever.
True.
But the machine is against us. The power of an incumbency to just continuously win their seat over and over again is pretty significant.
Mm, it's very true.
So,
I
I
mean,
mean,
let's think about it. Barbara Boxer was in office and Dianne Feinstein were in office for years. I mean, I grew up in California and I knew California politics, and even as a kid, and I'm in my 40s. Like, all I remember learning from political science was that your senators are these two women.
yeah.
That's
Well, I
all I
mean,
knew growing up.
and let's look at our current president. When he was a senator for 40 years, he
Jeez.
had the long-standing record of being the dumbest member of the Senate,
And he's now our president.
but he kept getting reelected. Like, I'm sorry if my senator has been called out as being the stupidest member of the Senate
Mm,
on, like, late night comedy shows or whatever,
sure.
I'm probably going to try to either get him to fix his image or get rid of him.
You would think, right?
Right.
That's kind of how that works, but for some reason, we still have not found a way to do that. Hmm. Very interesting to me. That's a good fact to know. Um, okay, this is really interesting because I still feel like, I probably feel he's probably one of the best presidents, but there's probably more. Approximately 15,000 books have been written about Abraham Lincoln. That means more books have been written about our 16th president than any other person except for Jesus Christ. Approximately 1,400 books have been written about JFK since his assassination. But I feel like there's more conspiracy theories. But that's how I feel about that one.
Yeah, Lincoln is number one, and I think Washington is number two. But Washington is thousands of books behind Lincoln. And Washington is a far more interesting character, in my personal opinion.
I would think so too, as one of our founding presidents. But for some reason, I would say that Lincoln has been probably quoted as probably one of our best, but also the one that probably everyone will remember. I guess I would assume. Also, I just love his animatronic in the All the Presidents at Disney World. It is pretty great, though, honestly.
But
Uh,
Lincoln also violated the Constitution many times during
He
the Civil
did.
War.
Ooh. How
Of
so?
well, the most egregious and most obvious one is the suspension of habeas corpus.
Uh,
The Constitution says that it can only be suspended. Um, I'm sorry. The Constitution gives that power to Congress, and Lincoln
hmm.
did it as president, and Congress just said, "Okay."
Where'd they go for checks and balances, huh?
Right.
Let's see how that works.
And then, I mean,
uh,
he took over the railroad companies, uh,
wow.
and used the railroads. I mean, it was brilliant strategically, but he used the railroads to move soldiers way faster than the South could do it. He
Hmm.
would load train cars just full of soldiers and send them off to wherever the fighting was.
Jeez. Very interesting. All right, we'll do one more. This one's pretty interesting. I'll put the link in the podcast. You can check it out for yourself. But 63% of registered voters in the United States believe at least one political conspiracy. All right, I'm going to be honest. I still believe that. I still worry about JFK's assassination.
So,
That's still
what,
something I still worry about to this day. So I'm probably one of those people that
just one?
listen. Well, I don't think aliens exist, but then I do read a lot of Dan Brown books, and so I'm like, is there really things that go under it? Like in Washington D.C., is there really Illuminati? But I'm like, no, it's just a book. It's not true. I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, if something did come out. I mean, I think I remember they were talking about introducing divinity or religious beliefs to helping NASA, I guess, maybe decipher or understand aliens or things in a different world. And I'm like, I mean, talk about the difference between church and state, but I assume that's two things that don't really go hand in hand. But yeah, hey, if that's how it works these days, I guess that's how that works. I have no idea. That is crazy. Well, that was a really fun little fact to run down, but guys, definitely check that out. That's actually really cool. All right, so we'll get right into it. This is actually a really good one because and as we know, at least in the United States, we are in our year of electing a new president. And, we all assume the originals of you're a Democrat or you're a, Republican, but as we know, that's not a clear line on both sides. And there used to be a time where independent was an option. I think I remember, it takes me age of me, but when Ross Perot, I believe, was
Mhm.
independent at one point and was on the ballot and did okay for a while, but got a little traction. But I think in the years since then, it's almost become impossible. So, Peter, to my understanding and to what I want to hear from your point of view is, are we really forced to choose between these two parties? It's like the far, far, far left and the far, far right. I mean, how do you really feel about this?
Well, those two parties have been in control for so long that they have written all the laws for ballot access, and they've written all the laws for who gets to be on the primaries, and all of the they basically made it almost impossible for an independent candidate who doesn't have a ginormous wallet to uh, to get on a ballot anywhere. I'm registered to the Constitution Party.
Mm,
There are 5 nationally recognized political parties in our country, not just 2, but
wow.
there are only 2 that have been in control for so long. Um, the Constitution Party is the only party I ever found who ties every point of their party platform
Hmm.
directly back to the Constitution. And I think it's the Constitution that made our country great. And I think the returning to a constitutional government is the only thing that's going to save us. So I chose to register with them. But what that means to me in Pennsylvania, which is a closed primary state,
Hmm.
I don't get to vote in primary elections
Wow.
at all.
That's so crazy because I think a lot of people feel this way. And I was talking to some of my younger family members, and as we talk about the young people's votes, they do feel defeated in a way because if you look at our electoral college, if we look at how things are done, you know, it's almost a defeatist attitude. Like if I live in California, I'm just gonna, regardless of how I feel, it's just a blue state. So no matter what I vote for, no what I say, maybe locally, you can vote for what you want to do, but in a presidential election, they honestly feel defeated because they feel like it doesn't matter what they vote. But what I try to always tell people is, regardless of what happens in your political party, whatever happens in your state, let's just go with that, you know, you still are entitled to a vote. There are still places you can go on a ballot and put whatever you want. I mean, you can vote for yourself if you wanted to. I don't really know how that still works, but you can find ways to fill things in and not feel like you're stuck into this, bubble of where it is. But I think 9 10 times, because we do feel a little defeated in voting, we normally just side with what, as you mentioned, these two major parties that we have. And it just feels kind of, I wouldn't say wrong, but it just feels,
It feels like a compromise.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like you don't
Well,
have a leeway.
there's part of this. There's a massive misconception about the Electoral College and what it means in our personal voting.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Constitution was set up so that the three elected federal offices, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the presidency,
Hmm.
were all elected by three different groups of people to
Okay.
serve three different lengths of terms.
Okay.
There is nothing in the Constitution that says you or I or any other citizen gets to vote for the president. The president
Wow.
is elected by the Electoral College.
Mm.
Each
Yeah.
state has decided to allow the public vote to determine how those electoral college votes are going to go. But
Wow.
that's a state rule. Your
Right.
state, tomorrow your state could say, you know what, screw it. We don't like the way people vote. We're going to do it ourselves in the legislature. And
Yeah.
there's really nothing you can do about it except for advocate. My problem with the way it goes now is all but two states
Hmm.
have decided to use the popular vote of their state and award all of their electoral votes
Hmm.
for the entire state based on the vote of the whole state. Well, I wrote an article about this a while back. We'll use my home state of Pennsylvania as the example. At the time I wrote the article, I think we had 18 electoral votes.
Hmm.
Well, Pennsylvania's a pretty divided state. If you look at the red-blue maps, the
Right.
districts around Pittsburgh and Philly and Harrisburg and State College and a little bit up in Erie are blue, but the rest of the state is red.
Mm.
So why are we giving all 18 of our votes to one candidate when clearly that's not the intent of the people of the state?
Right.
My idea that I would love to see states adopt is so you have the electoral colleges, you get the same number of votes that you get in congressional seats
Hmm.
and plus senators, two senators. So in my state, there are 16 congressional districts, and then we get two senators, so we have 18 votes.
Hmm.
Why don't we award the 16 votes by district,
Hmm.
and then maybe give the two senator votes to the winner of the popular vote of the state? That way, there's still a bonus. There's a hey, you won the state, you get these two extra votes. But a little guy, me, I can't run. I'm a federal employee. I'm forbidden from running.
Right.
But if I'm, Joe Schmo wants to run for president and he gets on the ballot and he might get maybe he only gets his district, but he might get an electoral vote.
Hmm.
Or one of these smaller parties. You know what? Maybe they only get one or two electoral votes per state, but that all adds up.
Yeah, it does. That's very true.
The winner take all nature that all but two states have adopted
Hmm.
has created the partisan divide and created that sense of defeat and compromise.
Mm.
Because, your libertarian candidate can't possibly win, your constitutionalist candidate can't win, your Green Party candidate can't win.
Right.
Because if they can't win the whole state, they get nothing.
Wow. It's really deep. I mean, Peter, do you think that, and this is probably a debate you probably hear 10 or a million times whatsoever, do we need to get rid of the Electoral College to really have a
Absolutely not.
shot?
Absolutely not.
Why so?
Because again, the House of Representatives was supposed to be voted on by us.
Hmm.
The Senate was supposed to be elected by the legislatures of the states.
Hmm.
And then the presidency, completely removed, is elected by the Electoral College, which are people that do not hold a government office.
Okay.
The fact that they're, again, the 17th Amendment changed senators so that they're direct elected, turning senators basically into, glorified members of the House.
Right.
But part of the federalist structure, part of well, to be quite honest, the founders feared outright democracy.
Really?
And to make our country more and more democratic, which is the push, will end up in tyranny. Name a single democracy that has ever lasted longer than 100 years. There isn't one. Because 51% of the people, or 50% of the people plus one person, can completely take over and wipe out the other 49%. And that's always what happens eventually.
Wow.
The way the Electoral College was designed to prevent tyranny of the majority.
Wow. I never looked at it that way. And it makes a lot of sense in a way. We think we get rid of one thing, we're going to make it better, but in reality, you're probably going to make it a lot worse.
Yeah, has that ever worked? I mean, name anything that the government has ever gotten involved in that got better. I'll wait.
Well, we'll be here all day because I really can't think of anything for a second. I mean, we think you like to think that they are, but it's almost like, yeah, no, we try, but I don't think we do a good job of it. I mean, I think at one point in American democracy, there were times where we were great and we did a good thing and we did great things, but I think now it's just it's almost like I don't want to say it's a pissing contest, but it's more of like a who has the most power, who's going to do this, who's going to change this. I remember recently, I think there was a whole issue of one of the seats, and please correct me if I'm wrong, where it was like they had to vote over and over again to decide who's going to get this next seat in the House, and was going to change the size of who gets what power. And it just was crazy to me to think that we're spending this much time figuring this out when there's other things going on in the world, but it also comes down to power and who's going to have that power. And
You're probably thinking of the election of the Speaker of the House.
Yes,
it was like 15 votes or something like that to get Kevin McCarthy in there.
Yeah, and it's just
And
like
then they booted him a year later.
right, right. It's like you went through all this for what? You wasted all this time and resource for what?
Yeah.
You know?
If you really want to get into what government does or doesn't do well or why and all that kind of stuff, I've got 2 articles coming out on my Substack, one this week and one next week, that talk about the change in federal government from 1913 to today. The first article is I consider the year 1913 to be the year that we just jumped off the cliff. We stopped paying attention to the Constitution and started doing whatever the hell we wanted to do. So 1913, I spell out the 4 reasons why I think 1913 is so bad. And then the second article, I compare 1913 to today. How much do we pay in taxes? How big is our government? How many employees are there?
Right.
These different things. And that second article really opened my eyes. I'm just shocked and amazed at the research that I found. And for an example, in 1913, before the federal income tax, before the massive expansion of government, there were 388 federal employees, non-elected federal civilian employees. There were 388. That was, at that time, one civilian federal employee for every 250,000 Americans.
Jeez.
Today, there are 2.952 million federal employees. That's one per every 115 Americans.
Whoa.
So the sheer size of government, I think, is illustrated very well in those statistics. And
mind blowing. Wow. In just a short time that's crazy. Well, this is great. And this gets us into, you explain a little more about Liberty Lighthouse and what that means to you and what that's all about. So tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about your background and how you became this great, amazing author of these books and um, your background on just ideally explaining to us all how our government is running.
Well, Liberty Lighthouse is my brand. It's the first thing I ever did was I wrote. It was about 2015-ish. I looked around at the world and thought, man, this place is something's wrong in
Mm-hmm.
society, and I wanted to do something. So I wrote a book. It's called Progress. Really, one man's view of social progress in America.
Okay.
And I wrote that. It's about 50 pages long, really short book. I wrote that at a time in my life when I didn't know where I was politically. I just knew something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Then several people said, you should do a radio show, or should do a podcast. So I started a podcast and I called it Liberty Lighthouse.
Okay.
And then my podcast turned into a live call-in radio show.
Mm.
And then I wrote a second book. And the second book was so simple, even a politician can understand. Simple ideas for seemingly complex political issues. This book is about a dozen ideas that either I had or came to me from guests of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Really simple ideas that would do just like it says, would go a long way to fixing problems. They're not solutions. They won't fix everything,
Right.
but they're a start. But the problem is they're all so simple that you can't muddy them up with pork spending and power broker deals and stuff like that.
Mm.
About that time, I realized, I'm pretty far to the right on the political spectrum when I wrote that book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came out with a third book. It's called A More Tyrannical King, How the Federal Government Has Become More Oppressive Than King George.
Mm.
That compared the federal government circa 1775 to modern government to see which one was more oppressive, more tyrannical and dictatorial.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing that one, I realized, you know what, I'm a constitutional originalist. And then as soon as I wrote that one, I came up with the idea for the new one, Trust Shattered, Cases of Government Betrayal. So I didn't put any marketing effort into A More Tyrannical King at all. I didn't sell very many because I didn't try.
Right.
Because I immediately started writing the fourth one. I'm an average, middle-class, high school educated, work a manual job guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I have ideas that would, common sense things that our government won't ever do. And you know what? And I can read the Constitution myself. It's roughly 4,500 words.
Right.
Pretty much anybody with a high school education can read the Constitution in a half an hour or less. But yet the government doesn't operate on that anymore. Our federal government now operates on what they call the it's the U.S. abridged and amended or something like that.
Mm.
It's a like giant library of a book that includes every federal court case dealing with the Constitution.
Wow.
But that's kind of like a 250-year game of telephone. You're looking at what this guy said about the Constitution because he based his opinion on what that guy said about the Constitution, and he based his opinion on what that guy said about the Constitution. How
Right.
about read the freaking Constitution? Like
Just
I'm
go
telling
straight
you,
to the source. Go straight to the source. Just get it done.
the words "Congress shall make no law abridging the freeness of speech." That's pretty clear. I don't need a Supreme Court to define that. No law means no law.
Pretty basic. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I am. And so Liberty Lighthouse is the brand that I created. It started as the name of my podcast, but now I use it as the publishing label in my books. So you open to the title page of one of my books and it says Liberty Lighthouse on the bottom.
Nice. I love the graphic.
I created the Liberty Lighthouse classroom
Okay.
which is online courses on the Constitution. It's still in its infancy. It's going to become huge, but right now it's about 18 hours worth of courses, and um, lots more planned. All of those things can be found at my website, liberty-lighthouse.com. That's my homepage, liberty-lighthouse.com.
Perfect.
And then I mentioned Substack. I write a weekly opinion article for Substack. So libertylighthouse.substack.com.
That's amazing. Now, after you finish this course that you're talking about, do you get like a certification, or what is your goal of like having people either just be very knowledgeable what's going on, or like just inform people of like, this is your constitution, this is what your country's founded on.
Mm-hmm.
Having this knowledge is really important. Is that really what you want to want people to take away from this, and knowing that at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think that we have failed miserably at one of the instructions from John Jay. John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the United States and author of several of the Federalist Papers, very important and underrated founding father. He said that it's the duty of the citizens of any state to read and study their Constitution so that they will better perceive when their rights are being violated. Actually, I'm sorry. He said that read and study your Constitution, teach the rising generation to be free. And that way you'll better know when your rights are being violated. And that's something that we have failed miserably at doing. You know,
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah,
I don't think they taught that in school. I don't think they even taught us the Constitution. It was like, here it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
they teach you the three branches of government, and that's about it. They really maybe the Bill of Rights.
Wow. I'm gonna take your class because I can't remember half the stuff I thought I learned the Constitution. But hey, I'm all about being knowledgeable, so that sounds great. All right, well, let's get into your book, because this book sounds amazing. Trust Shattered: Cases of Government Betrayal. Now, how did you come up with that title in the first place? What was your inspiration for that title?
Oh, I don't know. I honestly I don't remember where the title came from.
Oh, I
I
love that. Just randomly came up with it. Love that. That's how it goes.
Well, I wanted it to be a diary of reasons not to trust government, basically.
Okay.
And I guess at some point throughout the idea, I came up with the fact that they have shattered our trust, and that morphed into Trust Shattered.
I like that evolution. That makes sense. Okay. All right, so we'll get a sneak peek into the book. Now, the book, you explained to me, the book is broken up into 3 parts. Is that correct? Is there
Yep,
a rhyme or reasoning to that, or?
Yeah, there's 3 parts to the book.
Okay.
It's a collection of about 45 examples of where the government has betrayed their duty to protect our rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I divided them into the 3 immutable characteristics from John Locke: life, liberty, and property.
Okay.
So part 1 is betrayed bodies, and all of the examples there are things that have to do with our lives or health. Part 2 is betrayed liberties,
Mm-hmm.
and it's places where the government has trampled over our freedom. And then part 3 is betrayed estates, and that's where government is betraying their duty to protect our property.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, if it's okay with you, we could just maybe talk a little about maybe 1 or 2 subjects. Well, let's do 1 subject each one. I don't want to give too much away, because it seems like a good book that everyone just got to get hold of and learn about, which, I'm going to probably hype you up a little bit, because it's got me more intrigued of like, how's this going to happen? So we'll go into the first part, and give us a brief synopsis or overview of what Operation White Coat from 1954 to 1973. My mind could spiral to many things with this one, but I'm assuming it has something to do with science. This is going to be my first assumption, but let you go
Operation
with that.
Whitecoat is probably one of the lesser egregious transgressions.
Oh, Jesus, so there's worse than that? I just assumed that, I was like, White Coat just seemed like you were just experimenting on people or monkeys and Rise of Planet of the Apes. I don't really know, but okay.
Operation Whitecoat was a program where conscientious objectors who did not want to fight would volunteer to be lab rats rather than be drafted.
Wait, okay, hold on. Let's go back to this one. So obviously we had a draft. That was a
Mhm.
thing back in the day. And if you didn't want to go to war and die or not die, you took your chances being experimented on.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And I said that this is one of the less egregious cases because at least they knew they were being experimented on.
That's true. But geez.
But
Okay.
in true government form, it was very, um, yeah, we're going to use you as a guinea pig, but we're not going to tell you how dangerous this is or tell you. They weren't giving all of the information needed to make informed consent.
And were these people being like? Now, I'm assuming I'm going to think of devil advocate. They're experimenting on people to maybe what assume that we're finding ways to defend ourselves, or we're trying to stop, illnesses, or you know, all
Well,
these other things.
it was run by the military, so it was all about defense. Um,
Okay.
in total, about 2,300 people volunteered for this program,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all subject to chemical and biological warfare type experimentations.
Okay.
Hey, let's see how this reacts to the human body, or let's see how radiation travels through your system, or yeah, that kind of stuff.
I wonder if this is where we got the idea for Captain America. We did let a German scientist experiment on him and became one of the greatest heroes ever. But I mean, obviously,
He was always my favorite superhero.
let's be honest, he is one of the best ones. But wow! And so, were they compensated for doing this? Were they just and then if they did the experiment, they're like, "Okay, you did great, Michael. Thank you for your service. Go back out into the world and
That
never
that
talk
was, that
about
was
this again."
basically yeah, that was basically it. It was like you didn't get drafted, you survived. Woohoo, good for you.
But what about the repercussions? Like, what if they got sick? What if something happened to them? What if there were anything that happened? Like, it's just they were like, "That's it," and you're
Yeah,
done.
yeah. Oh no,
Wow.
this is another one of those things that nobody talked about for decades.
Wow.
I mean, think
And
think about something a little more commonly known, also in the book, Agent Orange.
Agent Orange. Okay.
Agent Orange is the code name for a defoliant that was being experimented in Vietnam. So one of the biggest advantages that the Viet Cong had against us was the jungle.
Sure.
So the government came up with this thing called Agent Orange. It contained huge amounts of dioxin, which was a known cancer-causing agent, and they
Wow.
just sprayed it all over the jungle.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Civilians, military people, tons of people exposed to this stuff.
You're also killing the ecosystem at the same time.
Right. Now, why would we care about that during a war?
Well, I know, but I'm still saying it's like it's just lasting impacts of things. Like, but also,
But the lasting impact was what I was getting at is these Vietnam veterans came back
mhm.
having been exposed. They started having health problems, and it took years, if not decades, for the government to even admit that they did this, that these people were exposed.
Wow.
These guys they came back to a VA healthcare system
Mhm.
that tried really hard to pretend that it didn't happen.
My goodness. I mean, you're giving your life for your country. You're doing your part, your duty, and you come back home, and then you're just kind of, mm, well, what a time! What a time! All
Well, I'm
right.
looking. I'm looking through the was it 18 chapters in part one,
Yeah.
19 chapters in part one.
Hmm.
Uh, 4 of them involved military personnel.
Four of them.
Hmm.
So they don't learn a lesson once; they just go back, keep doing it again,
Oh
pretty
yeah.
much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow. And you yourself are a veteran, is that right?
I am. I was a Navy veteran, or I am a
Yeah.
Navy veteran. I was in the
Yeah.
Navy during the first Gulf War. The one that only lasted for like 15 minutes and everybody already forgot about.
Well, that's okay. Yes, that's very true because I did read about that myself. I mean, did you ever feel at any point, and maybe this comes back to your background and your history that, obviously you can't talk about so much, but like just seeing these things and just knowing this and, or you're just looking back like, Yeah, I know I did my part. I served my country, and I'm proud of that. But you're just kind of also like, wow, it's kind of crazy what our government does at the same time.
Yeah, I'm proud to have served my country. I've been out since the '90s, and I was just checking. I normally have my dog tags on. I
Yeah,
still wear them, and like I said, I've been out for over 30, almost 30 years now, and I
yeah,
still wear my dog tags because, quite frankly, it's good information if you're unconscious. Um, name,
true.
blood.
Your
Um,
iPhone can't do that, people. Well, I mean, it probably can now, but who knows?
um, and I'm very proud to have served my country, and now I continue. I consider what I do now as continuing serving my country. I'm upholding my oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. It's Constitution first. The oath of any military member, any civilian employee, any elected official
Mm-hmm.
is to support and defend the Constitution, then the laws and the people above you and all that kind of stuff. Oh, the
Interesting.
Constitution is always first.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, okay, you've got my peak interest already, but you're going to take it to a whole nother level with the second one. So we'll move to the second part: betrayed liberties. Government's erosion of freedom. I love that word though. That word choice, erosion. I mean, in a way that kind of already gets us into the mood of what we're about to get into. So I just picked one regular one because I remember from my studies and what I learned, and I had a background in media communications and learned about the fourth unofficial house being, media, in case it may be, and how this has gone to many directions. But I'll let you elaborate. Censorship and internet regulations. Now, for most people who may not know, and I believe the internet was originally created by the government for the government.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. And then at some point they decided to just let everyone have it and say, okay, do whatever you want. And it got to take on a world of its own after that. So ideally, what is censorship and internet regulations in context of what you're talking about here in your book?
Well, this goes back to my quotation of the First Amendment: "Government or Congress shall make no law abridging the freeness of speech."
Mm-hmm.
We currently have an administration who flat out told us that they were abridging speech on the internet. If you remember, early on in the Biden administration, while COVID was still a thing,
Mm-hmm.
then Press Secretary Jen Psaki telling telling reporters that yes, we are flagging problematic posts and telling Facebook and Twitter and social media companies to deal with these. That is a violation of free speech. Now, if you say something that your social media company doesn't like and that social media company chooses to take down what you say, okay, that's their right. They're a
Right.
private company.
Right.
But the moment that the federal government coaxes, coerces, forces, advises what speech to be taken down, now you're talking tyrannical control of speech. Free speech should be absolute. Your feelings are not a reason for me to not be able to say what I want to say. My free speech does not end where your feelings begin.
Right. And do you worry about, speaking of free speech, do you think that it gets to a point of being, and I don't mean, I have some very radical friends about certain things, and obviously it's very interesting to hear what they have to say. But do you worry about the level of safety, or do you think the government thought that, okay, if we censor this, or we, put a halt to these posts or negativity that's out there, and there's different levels of it. So I'm not going to group it all as in one, but there's different levels of it. Do you think they were coming from a place of like we're trying to stop, I don't know, I don't want to say tyranny or anarchy, whatever case you want to put. They're trying to find a way to stop it from getting crazy.
That's the excuse they're going to use.
Mm-hmm.
But look at how many things during COVID the federal government said was a conspiracy theory, it was a lie. People like me, I had my YouTube account deleted, my TikTok account deleted. I
Really?
lost all kinds of stuff because I was having conversations with doctors that didn't agree with the official narrative.
Wow.
Now, hmm, why is the government trying to interfere with your ability to read another doctor's opinion?
It's
Not
very
all
true.
doctors have ever agreed on anything.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, think about that now. You get medical advice from different people, it's different opinions. Yeah.
Right. But for some reason, when this one particular bug came around, it became imperative that all doctors towed the line and followed the official narrative. And if they didn't, they were canceled. They were lost their social media accounts. Their licenses were threatened.
What?
And many of the things that they said in those early days have all been proven true years later. But where do they
That's
go to get
crazy.
the reputations back?
That's true because I was told that I had to listen to Dr. Fauci for everything. I wonder what he's doing with his life now.
I don't know. He's sitting on his giant piles of cash
Hmm.
doing whatever the heck he wants to do
It's pretty
because he
true.
made millions.
Oh my God. I mean, if that's one name I could think in history, it's probably Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, but so the censorship internet thing gets really complicated when you start talking about the section 204, 203, I think it is.
Hmm.
Um, the way the law is written is social media platforms are basically supposed to be curators, and you are allowed to put up whatever you want, and the social media platform cannot be held liable for what you post. But
Wow.
the moment that social media company starts acting as an editor and they take down your post unless it's illegal speech, which
Hmm.
would be threats of violence,
Right.
and that's about it. Certain types of defamation. Anyway, the moment they start taking down something that you posted because you don't like it
Hmm.
or they don't like it, they are now an editor. They're no longer a curator. They're an editor. And if they're an editor, then they should be treated as a publication and can be sued.
Hmm.
If the New York Post, New York Times, Washington Post, whatever, CNN, NBC, Fox, NBC, if any of these organizations knowingly put out a lie, they can be sued. But your social media company can't.
Wow. I never thought of that.
So the how it's supposed to work is if this social media company is not allowing conservatives to talk or whatever,
Right.
then you go to a different social media company. But when you have the government reaching in and saying, oh, well, using improper pronouns is hate speech, and therefore you have to delete those people's accounts, that is a clear violation of the First Amendment, but getting at it through the back door. The government's doing it, but they're using a third party. And the Supreme Court has said many, many, many times, the government can't get around the Constitution by using a third party. But that's
Hmm.
exactly what they're doing with this particular instance.
Yeah. Wow. So interesting. And it's sad because I do agree at some point, you definitely should have, like you mentioned, violence or the case may be, but like you shouldn't be censored on the idea of what you want to say. I mean, if you don't want to hear something, you don't have to follow that person. There's some people you talk to, and you're just like, all right, well, that's not something I want to hear about, and you don't have to follow them. You don't have to continue talking to them. You just gotta go, okay, and that's what it is. But to outright tell someone they're wrong or that their opinions are invalid or they can't really post about how they feel about things, it gets to me a point of thinking that we get to this level of being far. I don't want to say we're fully far left, but it starts to teeter to the point where we're not having a really good balance when it comes to those things.
Yeah. The middle starts to go away and people pick one side
Yeah.
or the other. I've often said it's speech that you hate. It is repugnant, disgusting, repulsive speech that you hate that you should defend the most. It's easy to defend somebody who agrees with you.
Of course. It makes it
But
easy.
if the Klan or the Nazis or whoever, I don't, whatever the gay mafia calls themselves now, if they want to have a parade in your town, let them. The answer to bad speech is more good speech. It's you can't. Silencing just makes martyrs.
That's very true.
You have to prove them wrong. Prove them wrong with facts and logic and common sense.
Do you think some people are willing to not? I like to say this in the nicest way, that they're willing not to look outside of what they don't know, and they're willing to just kind of stick to what they do know, and are really just fearful of probably change, but also just not being open to the ideas of things that are out there that they don't know about. You know,
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid of change. I mean, the Declaration of Independence even says that people are basically willing to put up with tyranny until it gets too bad. Like, we will suffer the sufferable we will suffer evils as long as they are sufferable.
right?
But my fear is that we're getting to the point that it's not sufferable anymore.
No, that's very true. Wow. Okay. Mind blown again. Okay. And let's go into another section of part three, which I feel is definitely happening nowadays. Betrayed estates, properties conquest by authority. Now, I picked inflation because I just feel like this stuff is going on now, but I want to hear from your point of view of how inflation really fits into this third part of your book.
Okay, well, the third part of the book is betrayals of property.
Mm-hmm.
And inflation is a government-made decrease in the value of your money.
Mm.
So let's say you take $100 bill,
Yep.
and you make a list of how many loaves of bread you could buy with that $100 bill, and
Yeah.
you lock those two things together in a safe, and come back to it a year later and pull it out,
Mm-hmm.
and then find out how many loaves of bread can you buy with that same $100 bill a year later. It's going to be a smaller number, right?
Right.
Right. The only way inflation happens is because the government keeps printing more money. And every time the government prints more money, the money that you have
Mm-hmm.
is worth less.
Wow.
So your property is being robbed from you because of government actions with no violence and no taxation. And it's being done every year because every year the government goes another trillion or two further into debt, meaning that they create another trillion or $2 every year.
It's crazy. It's grown so much since, well, it's always been there, but they always say, I think a lot of people have said this probably because of the wars or other things, and obviously inflation. But I mean, why are we causing ourselves more debt if the whole process is to create this country where I like to think, which is not, everyone should have an equal shot at everything, at,
Yeah.
property, at a stable life, at a normal income. But it's like, it just seems that I remember way back in the day, I was always taught that, if you were middle class, which is probably the norm of most people in America, it was like that was kind of the center of hope. But nowadays, it feels like the middle class is almost diminishing to what it used to be. And back to inflation again, it's almost like everything costs so much more. And what example are we setting our generations to come that what are they going to be able to have to afford to do anything? I mean, we have so much student debt, as a millennial myself. And it's like you're supposed to be able to buy a home, but the average price of a home now is more than what it probably cost in the 1950s, which we all know is totally dramatically changed over time.
Mhm.
Your income is not what it used to be anymore. And it's almost like you have to almost fight much harder to just survive in this country, to just live.
Yeah. Well, I personally, I don't think that the machine of government cares.
No,
I, I think they
God
keep
no.
spending because they're buying votes. They can't cut programs. Otherwise they'll lose votes. They can't. Right. The example I use all the time: if you're $34 trillion in debt
Hmm.
and your income is like $4 trillion,
Right.
let's put that into reasonable numbers. Let's say your income is $40,000 and that would mean that your debt is 34 billion. Or 34 million, I'm sorry. So you make $40,000 a year, and your household debt is $34 million. But our government, well, they keep giving money to nonprofit organizations and funding museums. That's the equivalent of you being $34 million in debt and buying a Picasso to hang in your house. Why? We keep giving money away left and right. Like right now with the immigrant crisis, taxpayers are giving room and board, food and shelter, and in the case of New York City, cash to illegal aliens. The federal government is robbing you of your money in the form of taxation and then wasting it in whatever they seem to be fit. And they don't care about the debt. They don't care about inflation until it starts to affect their votes.
So true. And it's probably under the watchful eyes of, and obviously you want everyone to have a fair chance to do everything, but I think it goes back to what you're saying. Like, it is about votes and, like, how does it make me look politically in the eyes of people? If I fix something, how does it help me look for reelection? How does it do for this? And it's like, what about the actual problem? Like, what's going on?
And let's be honest. If enough people get into Washington that they decide, you know what, we've got to tackle this debt, and they make the cuts necessary to actually start attacking the national debt, it is going to be insanely unpopular for several years. Because so many organizations and so many people are going to lose money. Nonprofits aren't going to get their federal grants anymore.
Right.
Welfare might get cut. Food stamps might get cut. Social Security might get restructured in some way. Yeah. Foreign aid might get cut. By the way, all of those things I just mentioned, none of them are authorized by the Constitution. Foreign aid, welfare, food stamps, donations of any kind, none of that is in the Constitution.
Goodness. We got to stay vigilant and educate ourselves, people. Wow. That's founding and very shocking. I should say shocking, because none of this is shocking, but it was great to know. You come away learning more than you think you knew, and you come away understand more. And listen, this is not to say one side is wrong or the other, but it's just facts that are out there that you're saying. And I think you gotta make sure you know everything before you kind of deep dive into things.
Back up a little bit. I said that welfare and food stamps and Social Security, none of those things are in the Constitution, which means the federal government can't do them constitutionally. Doesn't mean your state can't.
Sure.
Your state could do it. Your state could give everybody a living wage or a free health care and a guaranteed retirement and all of those things. The federal government was never supposed to do.
It's almost like, how are we really treating the United States of America in a way? Which is probably why you can still afford to live in Kansas versus New York City. But, that's cost of living wherever you can go in these cities today. Right. Wow. Well, Peter, this has been very great. And I really thank you for taking time and really enlightening us and letting us know. So I'm going to put your links all in the podcast, but Liberty Lighthouse. Definitely look forward to your articles. Do you have a time frame when this third book is going to be released?
It comes out on May 1st.
May 1st. Okay.
And it can, if you want to pre-order an ebook, you can do that on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you get your ebooks. But if you want to order a physical copy, whether it's a paperback or a hardcover, the only place you can do that is at trustshattered.com. And I've got these cool indexed versions of the U.S. Constitution where you can open up and go to the back and say, where does the Constitution talk about judicial proceedings? And it's Article 4, Section 1. And then, of course, the Constitution's at the beginning, so you can look it all up. I've got about 10 more of these. So anybody who pre-orders a physical copy, paperback or hardcover,
Mhm.
I'm going to give the next 10 people one of these with it.
Nice. All right. All right, people, you heard it here first. Well, Peter, thank you again for the time and information. And this book's going to be, I think, really great. I know you don't think it, but I think it's going to really enlighten some people and it'll be a great read. And I'm definitely want to be one of those that read it because that's went back to what we talked about earlier. So I have my conspiracy theories in my head. So it's always great to remind myself of that.
Well,
Conspiracies may not be all conspiracies. They might be.
yeah, but when you read this book, remember, there are no conspiracies in it. Everything in it is something that our government has admitted to doing.
It's true. That's a good way of looking at that. Oof, can't wait to get a deep dive into that. Okay. Well, Peter, thank you again. Hope to have you on again soon. We have a major election coming up later this year. God knows how that's going to turn out, but it'll be very interesting. It'll be very interesting how that goes. So, yeah, hopefully we'll stay in touch. And yeah, it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.